Welcome to, am I safe to say, Lucy, this is our last webinar before Christmas, this side of Christmas?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say.
Safe to say that this is our last one. I'm just waffling away whilst that number creeps up. I think we've got over 100 of you in today's seminar, so we're just going to wait for a few of you to enter the room before we begin to go any further. What can I talk about? I had a haircut. That's nice, isn't it? So like I don't look as scruffy as I was before. So yeah, that's all done. Yeah, and I guess it would be a good time now to acknowledge my great sadness for all of those theatres that worked so hard to open and now are entering tier 3. So my love and support goes out to everybody who worked so hard. It breaks my heart to know that you're all having to close your doors again, but sterling work in getting this far. Great. Okay, that number is starting to settle. So on a more positive note, I'm very excited about today's seminar, looking at the possibilities of live streaming. And in my prep for this, I've really learned some exciting things from Ian and John about the possibilities, about interactivity, not just about recording and streaming, but actually being having a different experience. So I'm really excited to join in with you guys and listen to Ian to start off with. So I'm going to hand over to Ian from Tyrell, and he's got a presentation for you, and then we're going to go over to John and have a discussion with John. But as you know, with all our webinars, you can interact with us. So you have the chat function. So there's a little chat box at the bottom. Say hello to us. Let us know where you come from. I know that you're from all over the country, from Wales and Scotland. It'd be lovely to see where you are from today. If you have a question, don't sit there in silence. Get involved. So there is a Q&A button at the bottom. Just tap on that and just ask a question, and there will be a section in the seminar where we can engage in discussion, because I'm sure people will have lots and lots of questions about logistics and how this is going to move forward. I can see lots of hellos from across the country now. Hello to everybody. And I'm sure you're all Zoom experts by now, but if you're not, there are different ways that you can view this. If you go to the top, you've got an option between speaker view and gallery view. I always prefer gallery view because I can have a little look at everybody on my screen at the same time. Just be aware that Ian is going to screen share. So what's going to happen when Ian screen shares is we'll all slightly be reshuffled and popped to one side whilst you engage with some content that Ian has to share with you. And don't be alarmed, because when Ian stops screen sharing, we will all be aligned back into place. So you have your chat function. You also have your Q&A function to join in with us today. And I'm going to shut up and very much enjoy listening to everything that Ian is going to talk to us about next.
Hi all, and thanks for joining. Let's see if I can get this to work. And there we go. Can everybody see the main screen?
Yeah, you sure can.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Yep. Okay, so my name is Ian Holden. Thank you for joining us today. Just a brief history on myself. I started life as a sound engineer. I'm a professional sound engineer. I've worked in post-production for quite some time. I spent a bit of time with long form and animation. I also managed a small production studio specializing in experiential experiences. So experiential activations is basically augmented and virtual reality as well as gaming in the sort of ad space. But I've also worked in sales for a number of big brands. I've either represented or been the brand managers for Avid, JBL, Soundcraft, Studer, and now most recently Clearcom with Tyrell. And with that, I'll hand over to John quickly, who can introduce himself.
The unmute, if you can find the unmute button. There we go. Yeah, thanks. I'm John Page. I've been a production manager for almost 25 years. I do a lot of work with a South African company and companies from India as well, and then tour them around the world and to the UK. I work at Chichester, do 2 or 3 things for them a year usually, and I've had the odd West End show as well. At the moment, I'm at the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, building on an experience I had a couple of years ago in South Africa, building a theatre. I'm managing the reoccupation, I suppose it is, of the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. It's had a multi-million-pound refit, so and it's looking fantastic, if not quite yet finished. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been helping Ian to find some of the questions that we as theatre makers have about going into this world of streaming. And Ian's got some of the answers. I'll hand back to you.
Cool, thanks, John. So who's Tyrell? Well, we provide turnkey solutions for the creation, manipulation, management and delivery of digital content to the broadcast and media entertainment industries. We are the official distributor for Clearcom and resellers for streaming solutions such as Livestream, Telestream, StreamStar, Twisted Design, Brightcove, and Sienna. We are specialists in providing live performance solutions, and that's our expertise in live streaming that brings me here today. So today I'll be discussing why we believe the next generation of theatre should be considering live streaming as a service offering for their audiences. And I'm going to begin with a quote, which I'll let you read rather than say it out loud, mainly because it's quite a bit of a mouthful. Okay, so with that awkward silence, now this quote was said 113 years ago. And since then, we have seen massive changes in how audiences engage with live cultural experiences in theatre, cinema, and live events in general. So why is this quote relevant to live streaming? Well, for me, currently live streaming is being dismissed as just another method of broadcasting content when it's so much more. When combined with other new media formats, it can be far more interactive and engaging than any other traditional format. And it kind of reminds me of so many other points in history that we felt were relatively insignificant at the time, but made a huge impact. So, I mean, I might be showing my age here, but when mobile phones came out, I never thought that it would replace my pager. I mean, my pager was my life. Mobile phones came out and I was like, there's no ways. Mobile phones are too expensive. Guess what? I have a mobile phone in my pocket right now. Betamax recorders, I mean, they weren't important. They were great. They were a great invention when they came out, but they have brought in Virgin and Sky media boxes, PVR. You have email versus fax machines. Remember coming in after the weekend and seeing piles and piles and piles of paper from all the spam you had received over the weekend. CDs versus vinyl. You know, when CDs came out, I thought there's no ways I'm going to replace CDs with my vinyl collection. iTunes. Who would have thought that by going along and categorizing MP3s online and asking people to pay for them would bring on Spotify and Deezer and Tidal. And Bluetooth. You know, Bluetooth came as a fairly insignificant thing that could be done. And now pretty much our entire lives are, you know, everything we do has got Bluetooth involved in it. And even TV, color TVs. I mean, they were a great invention when they came out, but now we have Dolby Vision, we have HDR and 75-inch flat screen TVs. So these were all relatively innocent beginnings that have changed our lives completely. And that's why I think this quote is so relevant. Now back to theatre. In 2009, the National Theatre became the first theatre company to embrace event cinema with the launch of NT Live. And on the 1st of December this year, the National Theatre announced their own live streaming platform, the National Theatre at Home. And while the National Theatre is not the first theatre to embark on this journey, it's notable in the sense that it signifies a definitive change in the theatre market. What the National Theatre has demonstrated with the investment into the National Theatre at Home platform is that live streaming and video on demand in theatre is here to stay. Sorry, I need to take some water. And they are not the only ones. You have Soho Theatre on Demand, Marquee TV, Shakespeare's Globe, and digital theatre all gaining popularity. Live streaming enables theatre to create broadcast channels that they can manage how they want. It's this unparalleled freedom, decreased cost in filming technology that permits theatres the ability to create high quality content for very little investment. And from an audience perspective, this technology provides the ability to watch live stream shows if the theatres are full, catch a show via VOD if they miss the original performance, cost savings for the aged and students, and those that may not have the financial means to actually pay for the show themselves. Live streaming is a new chapter in creativity that can never be achieved via traditional broadcast means. So from an audience, so I came looking into this from an audience perspective, as that's where I come from. I'm not a theatre professional by any stretch of the imagination. I enjoy theatre, I enjoy watching theatre, so that's the way that I came into it. But as a theatre enthusiast, one of the most enjoyable aspects of attending a live performance was being part of the audience and the ability to look around where I wanted and when I wanted. And this was an experience I felt that traditional broadcast could simply not provide. It was missing two ingredients that make theatre so appealing. It was missing the audience interaction and the engagement. Over the last few months, I have interviewed a number of people in the theatre business, a few theatres, and one comment has struck with me throughout. Unless live streaming was filmed with theatre in mind, the result would just come across as a badly filmed TV show. And while there's a lot to that statement, and I'll leave the technicalities of lighting and camera positioning to John, there's one truth that has changed, and that is film and theatre differ. Film is shot in the eye of the director, whereas with theatre, the stage is a canvas, and the audience can focus on whatever intrigues them whenever they want. So for me, the director's cut becomes a single stream broadcast. And it's basically what the director wants you to see is what you get. And while live streaming has opened many doors in so many ways, if packaged in the conventional way, it is still nothing more than a regular broadcast. It is still only going to give you that single stream broadcast. But unlike regular TV, it does have the potential to be a lot more. And in this webinar, I want to explore how we can take advantage of new media technologies to make live streaming more interactive, more engaging, and provide a creative tool that can be embraced by theatre professionals moving forward. So what are the current benefits of live streaming? Well, the truth is it varies depending on who you ask. So I'll break it down into three categories: audience members, theatres, and production companies. Before I get into any of this, most of this information was gleaned from a very good study that's called From Live to Digital, and it was done for the Arts Council. It's free online. And I highly recommend it to anybody that is looking to investigate into live streaming or anything like that. I have provided the link to Alicia, who will be able to put in the chat box for you. So from an audience perspective, a few of the benefits are convenience. And this is aimed mainly at those that may not be physically able to get to the venue. They're too ill to travel, or senior citizens. Another is more cost-effective pricing. Live streaming can bring down the cost for qualifying members. These could be students, senior citizens, or simply people who would love to watch a show, but just can't fit it into their budgets. And the third one is embracing technological benefits. None of the above points would exist without the benefits of technology. The fact that most average people have a computer in their pocket with the ability to connect to anybody around the planet should not be ignored. It's a massive privilege and something that we should all be taking advantage of. Then from a theatre's perspective, the first benefits would be, again, providing access to those that may not be able to attend. And again, like first, that was those that are not physically able, too ill to travel, or senior citizens. But it's also serving the education sector. This is already being done and has already proved to be incredibly popular. It's also providing new experiences for audiences. By combining live streaming with new media formats, performances can be packaged and presented in new and exciting ways, offering new experiences for your audiences. And it's reaching new audiences. Live streaming provides the ability to reach international audiences and younger audiences that are more comfortable with streaming technology. And the last one is providing business continuity. I think the one thing the pandemic has proven is how ill-equipped we were all for something this unforeseen. Live streaming can provide an alternate source of revenue during these trying times. And while it's not a silver bullet, it can definitely help. And from a production company's perspective, these benefits are very similar to theatre. However, I've handed a few more. Pushing artistic boundaries. New technologies enable new creative possibilities. And interestingly enough, pushing artistic boundaries is one of the top mentioned things in the from live to digital study that I mentioned earlier. Providing new experiences for audiences. Live streaming combined with social media and other streaming technologies opens up new levels of interaction and engagement. Reaching new audiences. New technologies enable new styles of storytelling and writing, which can and should entice new audiences. And engaging with technology. Live streaming enables a gateway into more interactive and engaging experiences. And I'll go into this a little bit later. Now, before I get into the interactive live streaming part of this presentation, I want to go over the live streaming building blocks. I want to explain how we go from filming a performance and how that arrives on YouTube or something more complicated like NT Theatre at home or digital theatre. First, we start with acquisition. This is where we acquire or capture the source footage. Nowadays, this can be done via camcorders, mobile phones, professional video cameras, or even webcams. Technology has taken something that was really, really hard or unaffordable years ago and made it very accessible today. Once the footage is captured, two things can happen. In a simple workflow with one source, it can be sent directly to a streaming platform like YouTube, Facebook Live, Twitch, or Instagram for distribution. Or in the case of multiple camera sources, they can be sent first to a hardware encoder. Now, basically a hardware encoder is just a computer that enables video switching and encoding. And this is pretty much most theatre scenarios, I would imagine. Video switching allows the director to focus on individual camera feeds, or ISOs, which stand for isolated camera feeds, and then he or she will cut these ISOs together to form a story, and then that story will feed into a CDN. Now, what is a CDN? A CDN is a content delivery network, and it's basically the backbone for all streaming platforms we know today. The big names in this space are AWS CloudFront, Akamai, Fastly, Limelight, but there's many more. There's tons. Now, these CDNs can host free streaming platforms like YouTube, Facebook Live, Twitch, or Instagram. They can host subscription-based OTT platforms like Digital Theatre or Marquee TV, or they can host privately owned OTT platforms like NT at Home or Soho Theatre on Demand. OTT, by the way, stands for over the top. And they are basically streaming services that don't require a set-top box like Virgin or Sky to deliver content. So pretty much any content service that delivers content over the internet could be classified as OTT. Anyway, these CDNs can contribute media in two ways, either live, aka live stream, or they can provide access to pre-recorded media, aka video on demand or VOD. These services can be delivered in multiple ways. It could be via an HTML page, a mobile app, or an app developed for a smart TV. Okay, then we move on to paywalls. Now, if you're wanting to monetize your performances, which I'm sure a lot do, then you'll need to get a paywall. A paywall is basically a door that is placed in front of your content that your audience will need to either pay to unlock or get given a key. Paywalls can take multiple forms. They can be included in platform services, they can be part of your web page, or it could be a separate entity completely that pushes your client to a microsite or a separate landing page. And then we move on to players. Now, it would also be remiss of me not to mention content video players, as this plays a part in interactive streaming. Now, just because a CDN can stream content, it doesn't necessarily mean that it can be viewed. For that to happen, you need a video player. And for the most part, they have a YouTube-looking user interface. YouTube has kind of standardized the look of it. So it has a standard navigation controls, volume, start, stop, all of that kind of stuff. Some will have the ability to choose what resolution you want to see. YouTube can help you do that. Others use a variable bitrate that will analyze your bandwidth and adjust the resolution accordingly. And this is the way basically Netflix and Prime work. Not all video players are created equal though. So a decent player can warrant quite a bit of pride on the provider's behalf. Again, a player can be supplied by the CDN or it can be handled by a separate entity completely. And then we move on to the exciting bit, the video augmentation. Now, as you can see, I'm going to quickly flip backwards and forwards. Now, as you can see from the diagram, a few things have changed. We can now access more of those ISO streams coming out of the hardware encoder. We'll go back. You can see there's 5 more streams coming out. We also now have multiple video players on the viewer side, and we have overlay controls on the viewer screen. What this means is we can now provide viewers with access to multiple streams at once, which can be manipulated in multiple ways. These streams don't necessarily need to be video either. They can be text, they can be independent streams of audio, or they can be social media. They can be whatever you want them to be. And this video augmentation is very easy to implement. It's just a simple overlay to the current live stream. So as I'm flipping backwards and forwards here, it is that simple. And it works also on free streaming platforms as well. So why interactivity? Why choose sort of an augmented experience over a live streamed experience? Well, I'm going back to that original comment that I remembered so well. Unless live streaming was filmed with theatre in mind, the result would come across as a badly filmed TV show. And that was actually, that came from David Evans a few months ago when I interviewed him about this. And he is right. And ultimately, it's a statement that sent me on this quest. So what can we do to set a filmed theatre experience apart? We need to bring in the elements that has made theatre so popular, and we need to inject that interactivity that nurtures the engagement. Otherwise, there's really no difference. And we can't really expect live streaming to be any more than just another method of broadcast. Granted, it's still an incredibly flexible method, but your end product would still be that badly filmed TV show, and it needs something more. So let's look at what we could do. So what you are going to see now is a jazz performance shot from multiple angles. We took all these independent camera shots, streamed them in sync, and then we allowed the viewer to choose seamlessly what camera angle they wanted to view when they wanted to. So in other words, if they wanted to focus on the first guitarist, they could. If they wanted to focus on the second guitarist, they could. But ultimately, they could choose which camera stream they wanted to watch. We also intentionally made the overlay buttons large and obvious. We wanted you to be able to see the switching backwards and forwards. Now, I have provided a demo. I have provided a link to the online demo to Alicia, but please view this demo after the presentation. Due to the nature of the product, there's a no-stop feature. So the song basically starts and carries on playing for 3 minutes, which is not a bad thing. It's a great tune. But yeah, you can't stop it. I was told that the demo will only be up for 12 hours. So if you do want to mess around with it, you probably need to do it in the next day or so. And here we go. Hopefully Zoom broadcasts the video like I would want to, but yeah, Zoom has its moments. So let's hope that it works as hoped. Sorry. Now, I wish I could have played that the whole song, but I think you get the point. So as you can see, this interactive engagement changes the experience dramatically. It draws the viewer into the performance more than they would have been by simply watching a linear stream director's edit. Now, I've got nothing against a director's edit at all. But the point of what we are trying to do here is to engage the viewer. We want the viewer to become part of the experience. And this is a relatively simple example, because with some great creative storytelling, these independent views can be so much more than just another camera angle on the stage. And sorry, I was actually supposed to flip to those. Now, these individual camera views could be different scenes completely. They could be different sets where the viewer could be enticed to explore different rooms at designated times, or the viewer could enter these sets at their own free will. It also could be a simple way to get around elaborate set changes, or it could be an elaborate Nolan-esque storytelling experience where multiple stories are told at once, with each room bearing its own importance or significance in the story. What I'm trying to get at is that you create your own story here. You can create whatever you want with these individual video playbacks. And then from an educational point of view, this augmentation offers a different set of benefits. Students will now be able to follow different members in a theatre production in real time and how they interact with other members to create a live production. And while flipping between camera feeds, they will hear the relevant audio as well. This provides a very unique real-world view into live production. And on a side note, the Royal Opera House, that's where I've stolen all of these, or borrowed these images, has tried to do something similar. I've provided Alicia with links should you want to take a look at it. It's not as elegant as what I was trying to get across, but it still is quite a good watch. And now we move to the actual controls of the augmentation, as I'm sure many would be concerned with how obtrusive it could be. I mean, I'm sure everybody saw those big buttons that were on the video. The truth is that that overlay control can be whatever you want it to be. So in this example, I've got four little buttons in the bottom that could disappear over time, but it could also be something a little bit more obvious, where you use it as a door or a window to entice your viewer to actually go or to click on that viewing experience. Again, it's about how creative you want to get with the engagement. Further to this augmentation could add polls or questions that could allow cast members on stage to participate with not only the audience at the live event, but also those watching. This could be a simple yes or no question. It could be a multi-choice for a game show, or it could even just be post-show discussion. So what are the benefits of interact live streaming over standard live streaming? Well, I think first and foremost, it's resetting artistic goals. This technology opens a level of interaction and engagement that's never really been available before. And while it's easy to dismiss, with the right creative foresight, it really has massive potential in my mind. Then there's the interactive VOD education. Interactivity creates a certain level of engagement that has not been realized before. These shows can be recorded and stored on a VOD platform for future use, and can contribute towards educational initiatives in multiple ways. So directing, filming, lighting, theatre production, whatever you want. It opens a new market segment. This is an exciting new technology that is bound to attract a new breed of audience. Be people that want to experience theatre in a different way, or just people that want to experience the experience. It's new, enticing, and it's exciting. And then this is the most exciting part for me. It's creating a new theatre experience. This has the potential to create an entirely new and unique theatre experience that complements live theatre rather than draws away from it. It opens creative doors for innovative and experimental minds that were simply never there before. So in closing my side of the presentation, in my LinkedIn bio, I have a quote. Technology has always been something I've been extremely passionate about. I am always excited with new advancements that change the way we work and live. And live streaming is that. It's going to change our world, and it is the next big step in society. It's already a $50 billion business, with projections of it being $185 billion by 2027. So there's no denying that it's not going anywhere. However, while the technology is exciting, it's not particularly new. And I've been trying to come up with a suitable analogy for how I feel with live streaming and theatre. And it's this. I am not a gamer at all. My last big gaming experience ended with Nintendo's Super Mario Brothers. But I've watched with interest how interactive gaming has evolved from terrible 8-bit games to a massive multi-billion-dollar industry it is today. And I feel like we're on a similar brink with interactive live streaming for theatre. For the first time, people at home, on a bus, or in a hospital bed can not only watch a live stream theatre production, but they can look around. They can see the stage from uniquely different angles. And if we include certain elements of social media, they could even interact with the audience and the performers. This for me is a massive step and has the potential to change people's lives. I initially asked to present to the ABTT because I felt I discovered something that could truly benefit the theatre industry in new and exciting ways, especially during these trying times. However, this is still just a tool, and it's up to the creative minds and spirits out there to turn it into something amazing. So in my closing statement, I have this. Let's use the challenge the pandemic has given us to rethink what theatre is. Let the business challenges we have been presented with give us an opportunity to develop a new user-viewer experience and ready theatre for a new generation of viewers and help build a new business resilience for the future. Thank you for your time.
Wow, profound. Thank you very much, Ian. Very thought-provoking stuff there. So I'm very swiftly just gonna hand straight on to John. We do have a couple of questions, but we can bring them into the equation later on. So John, you're more of a production manager, so you're going to talk to us a little bit more about logistics. What does it entitle?
Yeah, I mean,
what are some of the challenges to implementing some of that really exciting stuff that Ian has enticed us with, really?
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to say that I'm an expert in doing that, but I think we're all at an early stage in this process of finding how streaming fits in with theatre and how that all works. And possibly typically as a production manager, it raises lots of questions and lots of worries. But maybe not to start with the technical aspect, but to think about there was a question. Look, I'm diving straight into questions here from Sebastian, asking about the replacing of the live interaction with an audience, and I think one of the key things that Ian's talking about is not necessarily replacing that live audience. We're all really, it's really right there in our minds at the moment about how to get theatre out to an audience who are at home. But hopefully in a year's time, we'll be getting theatre, not even in a year's time, hopefully sooner than that, we'll have theatre with an audience, a live audience right there. So the great things that Ian's been talking about, I think, just supplement that. Okay, so production manager problems. Here we go. So you can't, if you've got an auditorium full of people, many of us know about filming EPKs and how that's done without an audience. So you can put a camera where you need to get a camera to get the best shot. This has all been possible in live streaming with a live audience, but it always needs considering and to be taken right back to the beginning of a theatre process. And I think increasingly that's something that we're going to have to do is raise at the first production meeting, or even earlier, probably producers, directors, everybody getting together and talking about whether this future production will be something that is going to be live streamed. I was part of a seminar or saw it on sustainability in theatre, and I think it might even have been mentioned on the ABTT one as well, that if we're going to make that work, we're going to have to start having that brought up at the first production meeting. And I think, this is another thing to start that ball rolling early and bring in all the departments from theatres into that meeting to see how does it go to the website, how does the live stream work with that, how does it work with ticketing, and theatres across the country have got different systems and different departments that deal with different things. I think digital is something that's really being pushed both financially and is a growing area of theatre staffing, and maybe the pandemic's going to push us into another phase of that, as more people want to see a live stream. Yeah.
Can I just to clarify? Obviously, it stands to reason that getting in there nice and early with the expectation of live streaming is really good. Are you saying it's actually quite difficult to retrospectively consider the notion of live streaming? I'm just thinking of all those theatres that potentially have opened and have had to close. You know, is it very difficult to retrospectively sweep in and add in a recording perhaps or a live streaming element to perhaps get you out of a pickle or regain some sales?
No, it's absolutely achievable to do that. The reason for going in early really is about, let's take lighting for example. Lighting close-ups, which you may have an opinion about how close to zoom in with a live stream. I think there's definitely a conversation about that in one of Ian's links. But lighting for a camera is very different to lighting for the eye. So there's something that needs to be done then retrospectively to make to really create a lovely image that's going to be streamed. Now, if you've got an empty theatre at the moment and you've got the funds to be able to bring your LD back in again and relight it for the camera, then that's got to be achievable. But of course, at the moment, you're not lighting for the human eye at the same time. So if that conversation happens early, when we have both an audience and a streaming, then those two can be married up better.
Can I just jump in quick?
Mm.
Just for the members that are the participants of the actual meeting. So myself and John are alluding to a conversation that we read that was in the chat forum probably about 4 years ago. And there's a very specific difference in how theatre is presented versus film. Now, theatre, your canvas is huge. Your canvas is a stage. So as a result, for things to stand out, you have to have bright lights. You have to have glorious costumes. The makeup needs to be overboard, because a person that is sitting far away from the stage needs to be able to see it. They need to be able to recognize that it's there, and it needs to, draw attention. Now, with film, that is not the case. With film, most of the scenes are directed in the eye of the director. So you will see, if you want to see somebody crying, it will be a picture of just that person. They'll be nicely framed, and there won't be anything garish behind them, because you actually really want to focus on the person's face, so any background imaging or anything like that will be fairly muted. Now, that's very hard to do in theater, because ultimately you have to cater for both sides. So you have to cater for the fact that you have a lot of loud lighting to cater for the audience that is actually watching, but you also have to film it in a particular way that it is still appealing to the person that's watching it on a smaller screen. So there's definitely going to need to be a new way of filming theatre. And just like filming sports, I definitely think you'll start finding people that are very, very good at filming theatre in a particular way.
I think on that point, I think one of the another exciting development might be that we start from a theatre point of view to staff this kind of thing from within, as you would do with an automation operator or something like that. You may bring someone in, and we'll be creating our own theatre versions of the film industry and television industry, rather than necessarily where we may initially go to that side of those people to provide us with a service. I kind of feel like we'll have in-house crew who can move between departments in some theatres. I think that can work.
And then
another.
Carry on, John. Sorry.
Sorry, I was gonna take up on a point that's been sort of raised in the questions about licensing of music and things like that. And I spoke yesterday to my wife's agent, actually, to get his take on where they are with the finances of live streaming. And he said it is proving at the moment very difficult to sometimes go retrospectively and find all the right people who should be getting a payment, which is standing in the way of streaming certain things that have been recorded already, but more recorded from an archive point of view, and then trying to find them. But that they're also working, the agents and the producers are working to get guidelines drawn up that go beyond the existing ones for things like NT Live when they're streaming to a venue elsewhere. So it is on its way, those sorts of things, and it didn't sound like actually it would be terrifyingly more expensive. And I had an initial thought that we'd be looking at paying everybody film rates, and suddenly I was a bit terrified of how we could make any live streaming work if that's the case. But then, of course, we're not live streaming every night's performance, so there is.
Well, I think it would also look, and this is the scary world. I mean, I'm also a producer. I make music, so. And I've released music. I've released music on vinyl. I've released music on many digital formats, on CD, and a whole bunch of different things. And now the new world is Spotify, iTunes, Deezer, whatever's the next best thing. And obviously, your royalty rates have dropped dramatically. And for live streaming to be something that works, I think we're going to have to see a similar model. And I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, but ultimately, as a producer, I would rather my music go on Spotify or iTunes and get streamed and me get a little bit of money than my stuff get pirated, because that's the alternative. That's what can happen. So it's trying to find it's the best of two devils, or you have to decide which way you want to go. But ultimately, I mean, this was something when I was speaking to David quite a while back, and I it was never even in my mind, was that there would be different royalty rates, and that live streaming all of a sudden would bring in a whole bunch of complications, not just with artist performances, but also with music, of course. I mean, it would, of course. So I definitely think that live streaming is here to stay, and it will become a norm. So it is definitely something that people need to start becoming comfortable with. And we need to start thinking about how to include it in contracts coming up. And the reason why I wanted to present this is because live streaming will happen. It is going to happen, just like mobile phones came in. Maybe not everybody bought mobile phones when they first came out, but everybody has it now. It's just a matter of that's just the way technology moves forward. So it's a good time to start getting used to the idea and to start preparing yourself for it. And like this discussions we had before, John, the best time to start preparing for these kind of things is upfront, rather than reactively. If you do it proactively, you're better prepared. You don't have to go back with the contracts and say, okay, well, now we have to make sure all these checks and balances have been put in place. If you've done it beforehand, you have that option without having to change things around or expect any more costs or anything to that effect. Look, like I said, I don't understand the technicalities and the ins and outs of theatre, because it's a very, very deep rabbit hole. But I can say that we definitely need to start getting prepared for it, at least.
Yeah, there's certainly been comments that more pandemics are in the future likely.
Without a doubt,
will be.
yeah.
we'll be more ready, hopefully.
I'm just going to keep you on that topic and just make it a little bit more specific for theatre. So obviously we use sync license PRS to sort of cover sync licenses, don't we? And obviously somebody's written here that they have found it quite frustrating that they've got to go to each publisher directly. That then takes a very long time to reply, and then they want quite a large sum of money, and they're asking if there's any way around this. My second complement question to that, John, is just a naivety from a tech point of view, is that when you work in a venue, if someone came in to do some filming, for example, all of the technician rates go up. Is that still something?
Well, that's exactly the sort of thing that will need to be resolved in a different way, because I think we're now going to have to look at actually what benefit is a theatre getting from streaming, and we're going to know that soon. We're going to, theatres there already are seeing the box office receipts at the moment. Now probably there'll be a little bit of a drop off when theatres are open again, but then hopefully it will be an addition. So from an actor's point of view, there'll be a certain number of nights of performance plus perhaps 2 streaming nights that are part of the contract, and that should absolutely translate to the crew. But I feel it's got to be based in the world of how much benefit it is to the product. If you're not. There's an honesty, isn't there? There's got to be an honesty over the between producer and unions and everyone at this point, I think.
Yeah, so I sort of naively, when I went into looking at how we were going to reopen and did all this research, just thought, well, that's the solution, isn't it? We've lost box office via social distancing, so surely we just live stream it and make the ticket prices cheaper. But also the beauty of live streaming, of course, is that you're going to get a new audience and potentially an international audience. Anyone in your time zone, anyone that's prepared to sort of get up at the time that it's going to be shown. But yeah, very quickly got reminded of the complexities of licenses and additional fees for technicians. There's quite an interesting question here from Sebastian, who I know is a very influential member of the union, and he's saying, do the panelists believe the trade union should revise agreements to include new streaming norm and avoid extra filming fees? I think so. Is there a discussion that we need to have to make this red tape a little less?
Absolutely, I think it's there's been payments recently that are sort of a suggested amount that have been under kind of a nicety from theatres who have, for work that they don't really know, because they're trying to stream something that happened just as an archive recording, and so it's gonna be tightened up, and no union surely wants to punish the theatre industry.
Finding a balance.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. I think it is definitely a big topic of conversation, though, particularly when incomes have been hit so hard.
I suppose it is really, really difficult. So as a backstage lady, obviously I've benefited in my career from filming rates for myself as a chief electrician and the staff that work for me. I don't want to be so bold as to say that actually I suspect everybody would want our industry to come back to life, and if that meant like perhaps popping that to one side for a little bit whilst our industry gets its revenue back in, I suspect there probably isn't a technician out there that wouldn't consider that.
It seems like it's an opportunity to be fair, isn't it? It's because it's something new, it's an opportunity to set it up well. I had a show in the States on Broadway, and I mistakenly got a video camera out to film a dress rehearsal because I thought, brilliant, I want some close-ups. For archive, I'll do that. Company are fine with it, but the technical department, who actually weren't on stage or anywhere, a rep from them came down and said, you better put that away because you're going to you'll keep charged for all the crew, and it seemed sort of really ridiculous that at the time. But that's the kind of agreement, I suppose, that they needed to sort out, and I think subsequently they have actually sorted that out. That for internal work, I think the system has changed, but it's a big discussion.
I think it's also about economies of scale. So I can absolutely understand a high rate being demanded for a video if that video is then going to be sold at a certain amount. You know, I can absolutely understand why. I mean, there's a reason why an actor gets paid a certain amount, because he knows that the company that's going to be producing the final piece of work is going to charge a big amount, or they're going to make a lot of money from it. But just like you take a look at something like Netflix, or you take a look at something like Spotify, I think is 12 euro, maybe 13 euro, whatever. I mean, it's nothing. And I get to listen to all the music I want. You can't, I mean, there's no ways that Spotify could charge, or there's no ways that Spotify could give every artist 50 pence per play or whatever. You know, it just wouldn't work. So it has to work within the economies of scale. It has to work with what people are willing to pay for, and then it has to sort of scale down from there. And, you know, I mean, let's be fair. If somebody wants to watch a live stream, how much is a fair price for a live stream? Is it, I mean, nobody actually knows, because nobody has actually got to a point yet where, look, there are a few. I mean, you've got theatre, you've got digital theatre, and you've got a few that have been doing this for quite a while, but they also work on a subscription model, you know, where you pay a certain amount. And I think it's £10 or £15 a month or something to that effect. So, you know, it all has to work within reason. I mean, if you've got your artists charging too much, then that product can't be live streamed. It just can't. You know, it's just not feasible. In which case, it means that you're actually losing out quite a large chunk of revenue because of it. So, you know, it really, there's a lot of math in it. In other words, this is not just a simple matter of turning around and saying, okay, I demand that much. It's not that easy. I mean, I would love to get more from Spotify, but the reality is the people that are actually paying for the service aren't paying a lot, you know. So, you know, what can we do? I mean, I absolutely do believe that Spotify should be paying more, but yeah, I mean, that's a very different argument, if you know what I'm saying. Just one question before we glance over it, because I see quite a lot of people have asked, what bandwidth is required? It's difficult to say, because the video flow, the particular product that you saw, it uses variable bitrate or VBR, so it really accommodates itself to what you can give. So if you've got a 50 meg line, it won't necessarily use the 50 meg line, but it will be able to stream in 1080. If you've got a 5 meg line, then it will drop it down to 320. But one thing to note is that you are not receiving all 6 of those streams at once, or all 5 of those streams, or all 10 of those streams at once. You're only receiving that one stream that you're looking at, and it just keeps on flipping over as you keep on changing from one to the other. Now, if you've got a picture-in-picture, that's a different story, because then you'll have obviously one stream happening outside of the master stream, but it's not an easy question to answer. It really depends on so many different scenarios, but it wouldn't be that much more than a standard stream. And also Video Flow's pricing model is interesting. I'm not going to go into the intricacies of it now. If anybody's really interested in it, we can take that offline and we can chat on email, but it's not as surprising as you would expect it to be.
Do you mind just quickly, before we say goodbye to the PRS issue, John, just sort of clarifying that aspect of it, of the consideration? So what are the ramifications for streaming with regards to PRS? Is it any different, or do the same rules apply? And also somebody's asking about international streaming, because when you stream, there's an option for that. And is there something to consider for international streaming?
I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't really, I don't know what the response to the PRS is, I think it's something that they're likely to have rules in place, but I think all of these we need to look at from each theatre. One of the things that's happening here is we're really going international, and smaller theatres are going to be in front of a bigger audience potentially. So all of the existing PRS, there's not going to be any getting away with it. I think that's the thing. Everything, I know everybody behaves very well, but if you're going to stream it, then you've got to be extra careful to make sure you're following the right things. But I think the unions need to help us here.
There's a lot of things to consider, isn't there? And in my research, I've certainly I've learned an awful lot talking to different producers about why they chose not to stream something. So I've seen quite a lot of theatre during this lockdown period, and I've always found it fascinating who didn't choose to stream, and a lot of it comes down to a lot of red tape around this particular area. So it's certainly not for us to digest here, but certainly I think there should be some discussions somewhere else with bigger people to perhaps streamline this a little bit and make this a little easier for us to understand, to make it more appealing maybe, and that's obviously a much bigger issue than we can cover in this seminar today, but it's nice to highlight it, something to consider.
Would it actually not be worth thinking about a webinar just specifically on that?
Yeah, very possibly. More than happy to facilitate that in the new year. So, but it seems like a bigger thing to look at.
Look, when it comes to royalties, it's a complicated. Yeah. I mean, it's complicated.
Let's move on to a little bit more of logistics. So somebody's asking about, how do you think theatre roles like front of house, stage managers, ASMs, how do those roles change with the live streaming aspect?
Yeah, okay. So we're thinking now from the point of view where we've got audiences back in the theatre, and they are looked after by front of house. That's a good question. I mean, there's mileage there, Ian, isn't there, for having virtual front of house? There's a whole, how do we could take that even further and take the theatre out into the foyer and walk you from the moment you arrive and drop off your coat at home. And I think I'm not. Is there a specific? Perhaps I can't see that question now. But is there a specific? Maybe there's a suggestion from front of house as to. I think.
Well, I know, for example, the Old Vic were quite innovative in I don't think they've ever opened their doors. They've just gone straight for an in-camera season, and they've been and I've had some fabulous discussions with them. I've been desperate for them to come and talk about what they've been doing, but bless them, they've just been really busy, which is great. They're running a very successful in-camera season. And the most inspirational part of talking to them, I think, for me, is knowing that the technicians diversified and learned how to become camera operators. So my first question was, oh my God, did you get specialist camera people in? And they just said, well, we had to hire some additional equipment or whatever, or procure some additional equipment. But no, in essence, the people that already worked there, the backstage technicians, did what they did best and diversified, and now run a very successful in-camera season. And I shall watch with bated breath how they integrate when they do open their doors, because I suspect it would be very sad for them to lose that aspect of what they're doing. There is a question at the top here. It's quite technical, so I wondered if maybe Ian could give it a little peruse, actually. But it's the first bit's quite clear. It's about exploring integrating sign language. So I thought it might be really, and then it goes into very specific technical questions about the different platforms and embedding multiple instances. So Ian, you might want to just have a little look at that, because it's quite a specific question. But whilst you're reading that, I thought it might be nice to look at the diversity and inclusion that live streaming comes across, because obviously someone was talking about sign language, captioning, and perhaps the socio-economic situation where more people can maybe access the theatre.
I mean, it's a massive opportunity, isn't it, to get to people who don't and can't go to the theatre at the moment, or for whom that is a real mission. You know, that's maybe the inclusivity department is able to offer one performance, relaxed performance or something like that. But if this can go into homes, then that's wonderful. And hospitals. I mean, I know Chichester stream their Christmas show to the local hospital and have done for the last few years.
Oh, that's lovely.
As a free offering to the hospital. But you know, that's all presumably been a valuable experience.
That's something that Chichester have done pre-pandemic. Then they've streamed.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
They have. Yeah. So yeah, it is an opportunity, isn't it, to get people who can't travel.
So like I said, I've done a fair bit of research into this myself. I'm quite fascinated by the notion of how we open our doors and keep the industry up and running, and I've watched quite a bit of live streaming, and I think that what I have really enjoyed is perhaps watching stuff that I wouldn't ordinarily watch, you know, because it wouldn't normally be something that I would pay an awful lot of money for, but I've tried it and it's been really interesting to watch it because it's been at an affordable price. The other thing that I really wanted to mention to both of you is that I've watched two different versions of a performance. One is where it was just live streamed and I just had to watch all the time. And because I've got a 3-year-old who isn't here thankfully at the moment, otherwise we'd have been interrupted. The second performance that I watched was Rent from the Hope Mill Theatre, and it was fabulous because Chloe woke up and it was just a disaster. But actually on that particular performance I could pause it and it was like woo. I could pause it and it meant I didn't miss anything as long as I watched it within a window between 7:30 and 7 o'clock. And actually that became incredibly, as a parent, I was just like, this is amazing, I'm not going to miss it. Or you know, we didn't have to make the decision as to whether me or my husband was going to miss a section of the show. And I just I wondered if you could talk more, Ian, about the notion of recording, but also so this particular performance was recorded but streamed to me in some way.
Okay, so
but it wasn't live. It wasn't live.
So look, you've got a few different ways that you can do it. You've got straight up live, where what happens in front of the camera is what you get with a bit of latency. I'll reply to the latency question later, but basically what you see is what you get. I mean, depending on the equipment you have and depending on, so for instance, a PVR, I mean, everybody knows what a PVR is. All that a PVR is doing is it's buffering, it's running through a recorder. And then when you press pause, it just starts recording what you've missed, right? And then when you
ask you to say, I don't know what that is. What's that? What's a PDR?
A PVR, a personal video recorder. So like your Sky or Virgin, I'm from South Africa, so I don't know what the UK equivalent would be, but we had DSTV and it had a PVR function in it. And basically, if we were watching a live game, you could press pause and you could walk out, and when you came back, you could press play. What would happen is then obviously you were watching a delayed version of that live game. Now that is completely feasible in this in this instance really depends on the equipment that you're using. However, I mean, you can have a stream show that is streamed directly to the person. If you don't have that equipment, it will just go one end to the other end. It could go through a PVR where you could have the facility to buffer it and press pause and record whatever you were going to miss. Or you get video on demand, which is literally the live show. It's recorded and then it's stored on your content distribution network, and it plays out like Netflix or Prime or anything like that. The only difference being the instance that I showed you had 6 different streams versus one stream that you would normally get via Netflix. The beauty of video flow, what you saw though, and like I described a little bit earlier, is that it doesn't stream all 6 streams to you at once. You choose what you're going to watch, and it just flips seamlessly between what you want to watch. So the demand on the viewer, as far as bandwidth is concerned, is not that high. Obviously, the demand on the person that's broadcasting it is a lot higher. I mean, they're sending out 6 streams of video rather than 1. But yeah, I mean, you could do it really depending on what equipment you're using and how far live streaming goes. I mean, TiVo is basically something similar to that. So yeah,
I just found it. Both streams were really interesting. I watched something. It was Crave at Chichester, and that was live. And what I loved about that is knowing they were there doing it. There was something quite warming about the fact that I knew they were on their stage doing it. And I was sort of furiously clapping at home at the end. It was a bit weird, but I knew that they were there, which was nice. But also, what was nice is that I could pause it. Because of course, when you're at home, you don't have, you've got all the distractions of your home, haven't you? You've got all
I mean, there's something really important about keeping the event nature of this, that it's not, do one day we want to go home and just have the theatre on in the background. I don't think that's necessarily what we're trying to achieve, is it?
You're fully focused in a theatre, aren't you?
You've made the effort to get there, and maybe that's something for front of house. Maybe there's something somehow we can develop with front of house departments that we, I don't know, send out some virtual red curtains or some theatre seats or something. I don't know. There's something about making that event beforehand, the countdown to it starting. Which actually a lot of live streams do have, don't they? That you set it up and it's not there yet, but you've got the stage is set and it's ticking until the beginning.
I think there's 2 sides to this, and I mean it's also something that was mentioned in that study and a few other studies that I've read, and also the discussion that I had with David quite a while back was part of the thrill of watching theatre live is not necessarily watching for mistakes, but watching for the differences in the performance from one day to the next. I mean, it's very conceivable that you will get not a completely different performance, but you will get a different performance watching a show on Monday versus the Tuesday or the Wednesday. So, that was part of the thrill of watching theatre live. And when I started looking into this, that was the nature that I wanted to capture. It was that sort of liveness and that rawness that I wanted sort of the viewer on the other side to be intrigued by. But then at the end of the day, you obviously don't get the same convenience that you'll get with video on demand. So I think there's sort of a place for both of them. And what I do love, what I have been seeing a lot of is a lot of theatres that are doing live theatre, they have sort of like a limited amount of seats and it's a one show only. So you see that show on the Thursday, that's it, you never see it again. And that kind of ensures that the person is paying attention to that show and make sure that there is no distraction around them. And I think, look, ultimately, if you're sitting in a theatre, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're not going to have those distractions. But unfortunately, in times of pandemic, we can't sit in theatres. So, we take what we can get. I do think it's going to be interesting to see how things evolve and, what settles, because there's a lot of ideas right now And ultimately, you'll find some ideas work and some ideas don't. So, but ultimately, I do think that we are going to be moving forward with live theatre. I definitely do think you'll start seeing more theatres invest in sort of OTT services like National Theatre, or to Theatre at Home, and that kind of stuff.
There's a very interesting comment in the chat actually from someone called Christine, who's saying that the front of house team all became virtual ushers so they could help out with audiences that have difficulty logging on with issues in the stream.
Yeah, which is great.
I can't reiterate that enough. So everything that I've seen live streamed, there has been an infrastructure put in place for if you didn't get your link or it didn't work or something. So I was going to ask Ian a little about that sort of like support structure for live streaming in that sense, and also about contingency. So obviously, having done quite a bit of research, I have watched a couple of performances where they've had some really big issues, and it's stopped for quite a long period of time, and my heart broke for them.
Oh, look,
as a technician, I stuck with them, and I can categorically say that it did come back online, but it does highlight for me the delicacy of this platform. So having contingency and making sure that you've got the right software and hardware and whatever else, because you don't want to lose the performance, if that makes any sense.
So our business is broadcast. Broadcast, you don't fail. You don't fall over. And in broadcast, they will buy multiple units to guarantee that there are no fallovers. So it's not inconceivable for a broadcast for a broadcaster to have multiple servers and one server just be a backup of the first server. It does nothing besides a backup. So it could be there for 10 years and it does absolutely zero, but it is a backup in case that main server falls over. And that is its redundancy, and it's part and parcel of broadcast. And look, it costs money, but that's what happens if you want to have that fail safe. There is no other way to it. Things fail, technology fails. And the only way to get around it is to have an exact copy as backup. You know, and I mean, that's the way it works in broadcast, and it's worked in broadcast well. You know, I mean, it's very rare that we see black screens on TV, you know, so in like presidential speeches or something to that effect. So that is, you know, maybe you can get away with it a little bit more in theatre. I don't know. I don't want to say that. But in broadcast, you absolutely have to have contingencies in place. And I think if people are looking, or theatres are looking to go live stream and not, you know, hit those sort of barriers or those sort of walls, they are going to need to think about those contingencies, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight. Somebody's mentioned in the chat that, of course, the more that we dive into this, the more like you know, it's more about spend, which of course in our industry at the moment, unfortunately, is budget is a huge issue, and income is a huge issue. I do think that you need to explore the income revenues and work out if the marketing team can justify it and whatever else. So obviously, like with the Old Vic, they've gone completely online, and they've obviously made a success of it in that sense, because their series of online activities have happened, and having spoken to them, I know that they have backups and things like that in place, which they can justify the expenditure.
But it's about scaling, isn't it, of a system, as is done in theatres of different sizes across productions. I mean, you know, I've put shows out with backup projectors and the full kit. And then I've also put shows out with one projector, and if that went over, then there was a plan, you know, that came up, because there was no budget to have a backup projector, you know, that sort of, or we used the backup projector to do something else, you know, that kind of budgeting. So I guess it's probably something that shouldn't be ignored because it's too expensive. I think it's worth looking at entry level and working the way up.
But can I say one thing? And I mentioned it briefly in the actual presentation. Video technology has come a long way. So I've been, I was selling Sony video cameras 20 years ago. I don't sell Sony video cameras right now, but I have sold some JVC cameras and some Panasonic cameras. And what you get now for the quality and what you can do versus what you could do 20 years ago are very, very different. So a camera that would have been of feasible quality, that would have been of broadcast quality 20 years ago would cost 10 times what a camera of now would cost. And the camera now is better quality, it does more things, and it's much better. So yes, there are prices involved, you know. I mean, that's just the way it works. But in order to have done this 20 years ago, what we are talking about, you would have needed an OB van, you would have needed a truck parked outside the theater. The feeds would have needed to be sent from professional video cameras. They would have gone down SDI cables into a video switcher, a very expensive video switcher. Then that would have been streamed via satellite to the bird, which is a satellite in the sky. That would be streamed back down. That amount of money alone would have put any of these dreams that we are talking about right now far away, very, very far away. Live streaming has brought down those costs significantly. And I mean, we're talking dramatically, like it's maybe a 10th or maybe even a 5th of what that would cost, you know? So there's costs involved. I mean, there always will be, but it's interesting now because live streaming is becoming more and more popular, and there's more demand for the equipment. The equipment pricing is becoming less and less. You know, if you take a look at some of the products from Blackmagic, they're very affordable. I mean, like £800 for a box that will live stream, for a live streaming switcher. You know, it's not. I don't know if I'd want to take it into this kind of situation, but it can do it. I mean, it's very, and it will do it well. It will give you, I don't know if it works at 4K or 1080 or whatever, but I mean, it will do the job. And £800 is not a lot to do this. You know what I'm saying? That's not, I mean, I wouldn't think that would be an inconceivable price. For me right now, the biggest price actually is the filming teams and the cost of actually filming the production. So to put something together like I showed you there, you would need at least four cameras, right? Now, look, I mean, you could make them fixed cameras and you could sort of control them remotely. So it really depends, but depending on the production and depending on how fancy you wanted to get, that is where your cost is going to be involved. It's going to be with the film crews, and that kind of stuff. And then that's where, you know, I started pushing the conversation to John. Is this something where the theatre can now start stepping in and doing it themselves, you know? Do they start training up staff to do these kind of things? I mean, now these cameras are going to be permanently installed. So it's not inconceivable, just like a mixing desk. I mean, you have a sound engineer that works at mixing desk. Why shouldn't there be a camera operator that is permanently, you know, employed to handle that kind of stuff instead of bringing in outside companies to do it?
That's an interesting one, John. And would you have to allow some, like, would our production schedules need to be adjusted to allow for this?
Yeah, I think. I think so. I think there's a question there about how much time to allot for setting up, and that's a wide question really, because it depends on what size of production it is. It depends on how integrated the live stream is. I think, though, that within teams of people working in theatre already, there are people who have an eye for theatre and who could pick up a camera and more quickly be able to get the right shots, having watched a few rehearsals, than perhaps bringing an outside team in. So I think, again, as Ian was saying, you know, kit has got smaller and cheaper, and the people who are operating it not got smaller and cheaper. They've got, we can cut straight to the chase with people who know exactly, now they have a sense of theatre and a feel of what they want to achieve, and the person who's going to vision mix that, there are people in-house, I think, or at least already in our industry, who are.
I think that technicians are some of the most accommodating and versatile people I've ever come across. So I've done many a panto back in the day. I'm very pleased to say it's changing now, but back in the day as a chief electrician, the video person would come in and then just leave, and then it would just be the responsibility of the lighting team and we had like a 3D turtle in a panto and 2 projectors that you had to align up and stuff, and I very quickly had to learn how those projectors worked and do you know what I mean? So I think and I nursed these projectors through that panto, so I think I just remember that very and had to, but I think that we're very practical technicians, and I think there's a lot of technicians out there that would be very happy to learn this new skill set going forward. And I know there are lots of theatres up and down the country that are successfully using their backstage staff in order to do this. So maybe the answer, Ian, is that they come in for a bit to show us, to get us on our way, and then we can be left, we can be left with it. Do you see what I mean? Maybe
that's always a tricky one, because then you're taking
of course, then you're taking work. Yes, no.
So it's I have companies that I have approached to help me with this exact problem. One of the discussions I was having right at the beginning, and it was quite interesting because theatres differ. So the bigger the theatre, the more the technical skill, and the less I need to worry about what to do with the equipment once it's applied. So for instance, me giving equipment to John Page, I would be able to go through the stuff with him and more than likely walk away and never have to see him again. Whereas a smaller theatre would require a lot more hand holding. And it poses very unique challenges to actually putting proposals together, to putting quotes together. At the beginning of this, I wanted to create a quote, or to get a number that I could go up to a theatre and say, it's going to cost you this much to do a live streamed show. And the reality is you just can't, because every single theatre has its own set of challenges. So with that, I actually started approaching production companies and seeing who could help me present these shows. And the thing is that you actually need to have a fairly good production team. If I find a production team that is that is cheap and does a bad job, it's my name on the line. It doesn't do a great job for live streaming in general, and it doesn't benefit anybody. So you actually need to make sure that the team is really, really good, and really good teams aren't cheap. So it's gonna look. I think maybe the way around this is actually to go all the way back down to the root level, to education. And maybe this is something where, it needs to be spoken about at that level, rather than, talking about it higher up the chain. Maybe cinematography needs to be a discussion in
production. No,
maybe we are moving into those realms. I mean,
certainly is.
And that's how you become efficient, isn't it? It's not necessarily about taking the food from the existing cameraman's table. It's more about being efficient within our industry and
diversifying as well.
Diversifying a bit, yeah.
As a lighting tutor, I've certainly started discussing with my students the need for us to understand light for camera now, and also not be illiterate with camera operation, so that we are more, 100%, we can be more helpful. And diversify our roles as our industry comes back to life a little bit. So we're sort of running out of time now, but I'm just aware that there are some other questions here. There was a very good question about digital theatre or virtual theatre. I'm so sorry I didn't get to that one, but we did sort of, I didn't feel that there's lots of fabulous platforms, and there's lots of companies now that have moved on to digital theatre, but hopefully one of these guys can pick that question up afterwards. Somebody was asking about live streaming in the round. It was just, I should imagine that's quite a complex answer, which is why we didn't get to that one.
I didn't understand that. In a round, what's...
It just means that you have audience, in a live performance, you would have audience all the way round the performers.
Right, okay.
I almost felt like in order to teach lighting in the round, it's probably as complex to film it as well. So I didn't feel we quite had enough time for that one. And then somebody was also asking, I do want to just quickly mention this, about who chooses the edit. And I suspect that if you've got a live stream company in, it's whoever the director or whoever plays the
but,
do you know what I mean? I'm sure it's not.
That's really important because it might want to be, some directors of the theatre piece are going to be really keen to be right there and directing for it. So I think, that's something that we can take back into Theatre House as well, So
it was an interesting question my sales manager posed to me yesterday when I was presenting this to him. And, the whole push that I have with Video Flow right now is being able to give viewers the ability to choose their angles, to see what they want to see. So if they want to not focus on the lead performance at that point in time, and maybe focus on somebody in the audience or somebody behind the scenes or whatever, I wanted them to have that opportunity, because ultimately that is what I think you get from a live theatre performance, the ability to look around. I mean, sometimes I'm not intrigued with the lead performance. Sometimes I'm intrigued with something else completely different. And then my boss, obviously working in broadcast, said, but I mean, surely the director or the DOP will be pretty unhappy with that, because I mean, he is cutting the show together and presenting it in a particular way, and he gets paid a lot of money to do that, right? And ultimately, it's really, I mean, we are really creating a different genre here. So, it's something that maybe the director will need to deal with. I don't know. But
I think it's the merging of two worlds, isn't it? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's the fact that you're already talking about a DOP. I've worked on jobs as a theatre production electrician where I've had a theatrical lighting designer and a DOP, and it did my head in. I didn't know who to listen to at any given time. So I do think that we're merging two, and this is the start of a discussion that I think can go on for a long time. But I'm aware that we've gone over time on this one. But it's been so fascinating. I just wanted to end on a question that somebody has put in the Q&A about. And I'm just going to read it. It says, right now, it feels like a lot of individual theatres are looking to figure out their own setups and trying to market and sell those individually to make it profitable. So we're all on a lone fight at the moment, aren't we, to try and find a profitable way of engaging with our audiences. And this person is saying, do you think that theatres should pool their resources together and perhaps with the help from the national streaming platform or something to have a central place to offer and sell their product? Peter Morgan, that's what that's our aim here at the Association of British Theatre Technicians, is to encourage discussion and talks, and collectively come together to provoke these discussions and share ideas. It is very much David and I's dream is to try and get some people on a webinar for you who have successfully done that, and I'm so grateful to Ian and to John for this, to just giving it to give us some of the nuts and bolts before Christmas is just brilliant. The only reason that we've not been able to get some of the success stories of live streaming in theatre is they're very busy. It's been very hard to get them all in the same room at the same time.
Attention, please.
Oh, there we go. That's our fire alarm test.
So John mentioned that he might have a fire alarm test, so he's probably going to go on mute now. But it is very much in our radar here at the ABTT to get some of the success stories in for you, and hopefully armed with the information that Ian has given you today, we can hear a little bit more about how that has been applied into practice with some of the success stories in theatres in the new year, and David and I will work very hard to try and deliver that webinar for you going forward. So we're 4 minutes over. Thank you so much for joining us on our last webinar of this year, I think, Alicia, don't you think? I think, yeah.
Yeah, so, that's right.
Yeah, so it's been one hell of a year, and it's been my pleasure to spend this year in a tiny Zoom box with you, delivering lots of different Zoom seminars with you, and this one's been particularly poignant for me. It's a really innovative, we're looking to the future and we're trying to get something positive out of this going forward. So many thanks to Ian and for John for preparing this for us and demystifying it a little bit for us and giving us some food for thought. So obviously all of the information from today's seminar will be posted on the ABTT website. Ian, lots of people asking about whether your slideshow will be shareable. I'm sure that won't be a problem. We can post that on our website, on the ABTT website. The recording for this will go on the resources page. Alicia will put all of that up, and I'm sure she'll put as much of the chat information up as possible going forward, and you can use it as a resource. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. Just remember that the ABTT is only as powerful as its members. So if you're not a member, why not consider joining our gang in the new year, and being a part of the association and building it stronger. I very much want to continue doing these seminars for you into next year, and working together to find a way forward in industry. So for those of you that are going into tier 3, my heartfelt wishes are being sent your way. Have a very lovely Christmas and a really good new year, and I hope to see you at a seminar in the new year.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.